the cloud. Hello, awesome COGAT community. Monica Simonds here again. So excited to be here today with another one of our author talks. This is the author talk for April. And I am so thrilled to introduce you to someone I get to call a friend as well, Melody McAllister. So I'm going to let Melody introduce herself to you now.
Thank you, Monica, and thanks for having me here. And for anybody watching, thank you for taking the time today to do that. I am an educator, and I started my educator my educator license. I am off. I started teaching in Texas in the early 2000s. I guess it was 2004, and I taught in Texas until 2019. And I moved to Alaska with my family for an opportunity my husband had for his work. My husband and I have 5 kids. When we moved to Alaska, I was working for a publishing company. Um, I'd left the classroom almost, it was almost the end of the year, but anyway, I needed a job. So I started working for EduMatch Publishing at the time. It was about a year before the pandemic, and I'd uh, I'd been a part of some books, like just adding a little bit to some chapters. But I submitted my children's book, The I'm Sorry Story, and they took it, and it was awesome. I wrote that while I was teaching in Texas. It'd been a story that I'd had for in my brain for a long time, and I wrote it for my students. I never really thought that I would have it published, but since then, I have written for several different books. Yeah, and it's been an incredible journey. I was in the classroom full time again last year. Um, but this year, I'm the director of an ed tech organization here in Alaska, which is amazing. So everything I've done for the last 20 years is either been in the classroom or education adjacent, but I am an educator through and through, and honored to be one in the ranks of so many amazing people, including you, Monica.
Well, I feel the same about you, and we've all got to stick together. Am I
For sure.
right?
You are
Um,
right.
yeah, completely. So, because this is an author talk, we are going to start with discussing the I'm sorry story because it's the
Yeah.
first one I want to talk about. And I think sometimes we all think, and you said it, um, I never thought I would do anything with this. It's a story I had written for my kids. So could you give us a little more context about who those kids were,
Yeah.
how this story came about, not the publishing side, but how the story itself came about, and maybe
Yeah.
no spoilers, but maybe tell us a little bit about it.
And it's okay. You know what? It's a children's book, so it's okay if there's some spoilers, I think. Because people want to know, like, is this something I want to read or not? But anyway, so my oldest child is 16, so it's probably 17 years ago. I was teaching in Garland, Texas, at an amazing elementary called Carver Elementary, and I was teaching 5th grade, and my students would come in from like specials or lunch, and I remember I had to teach math at a certain time of day. And whenever I would try to teach math, if it was right after something, it was right after lunch or specials. And I just felt like most of the time that I was trying to teach, I was putting out fires. They just come from playing and everything. They were fighting with each other. And the drama, of course, if you are a 5th grade teacher or anywhere in that level, the drama gets really crazy. So I was like, I don't want to lecture them because I just don't want them to like ignore me. I wanted to find a way to help them understand that, we're going to have conflicts with people every single day. It doesn't have to end friendships. You can recover from it. It doesn't have to turn into like a bullying situation. I mean, just everything that teachers face every single day. But I didn't want it to be a lecture. So I had this story. This story had actually been sitting in my head for a long time. I went ahead and just blah, just got it all out. It was probably like the first, there probably wasn't a lot of edits, honestly. And this was, 17 years ago. So, I mean, PowerPoint at the time was how techie I was. I wasn't super techie. But in my classroom, it was a beautiful new school at the time. Um, I did have, a screen. So I just, from my computer to the screen, that's about as techie as it went. No illustrations. We just read it one day. We just read it to the class, and I read it as vibrantly as I could to keep them engaged. And they just listened, and it was a great story about how the main character Ryan, how he's constantly doing things to people not necessarily trying to make people mad, but just the things that he does during the day. He's not thinking about how others feel. And so he's never, and then his teacher, Miss James, steps in and she's like, you know, Ryan, like, I know that you're a good person and I know that you're struggling and I know that you don't understand why you're struggling so hard. And like, he says sorry all the time. Why? And Ryan doesn't understand why just saying sorry doesn't help. And so she sits down with them in the story. She explains it how I would want to explain it to my students. How, you know, I think I was pregnant at the time, and my brain is so bad. Like I'm perimenopausal. Okay, like I'm like, was I pregnant or was it the year before? I think I was actually pregnant because I feel like I had to get the story out before I had a baby. Like in my mind, I was thinking I better hurry up and write this because if I don't, I'm going to lose the opportunity. So everything that I wrote was what I wanted to share with my kids without being too lectury. And so that I knew that they would ignore me. So the story and all of it's a glory at the time. And I fitted around those the schedules that we had. It was very personal to our class. And at the end of they were like, "Oh my gosh, Mrs. McAllister, how did you know? How did you know?" And I was just like, "Well, honestly, because I remember. I mean, I was in my 20s still, so I could still remember what it was like to be a fifth grader. Um, they probably thought I was over the hill at that time, but I was like, listen, I know what it's like to be young. I know what it's like to have conflict, and also, you're not the first fifth grade class I've ever taught. I mean, this is not abnormal what you're going through, and there's a way to handle it and a way to move on. And we just talked about that. And it was a conversation that we ended up having for the rest of the year. So it wasn't like just a one time story. You know, we read it a few times, we talked about it. It was just, and I think whenever I've read it since, and you know, it's changed quite a bit. Like, I don't know how many times it's been edited. And honestly, even though it's published, I would go back now and edit it if I could, right? Because I know more now too, since it's been published. But every time that I talk with a class or read with students the story, the discussion at the end is the most important part. Like, how did the character change at the end? Why is, do kids can detect, lying. I have a problem with cussing. They can detect the BS, right? They know, like, if somebody is being real or not. They are the greatest detectors of that. And so they've all been um, told crummy apologies. They've all made crummy apologies. So it's like we can take on both roles when we talk about that. And an apology isn't necessarily sorry. It's more than that. And and forgiveness is a part of that as well. And I always thought that I would write something about forgiveness, but forgiveness is such a personal thing. I really, if I do write something like that, I really want to honor it, because what I grew up believing about forgiveness and how I feel about forgiveness now is so different. And it's hard to write a book that really honors everybody's beliefs in that. But I do think that forgiveness is healthy if you can. And I think that it helps you to move on. But also, just owning, this is the most important part of the story, is just owning what you did that made people feel uncomfortable or what hurt somebody else's feelings. And if you can make it right, you should. That's your responsibility. And there are times where you can't make it right. And you have to own that as well. And so we talk about all of that, and it's a part of the story.
That is so incredible. And by the way, everybody, I have another cold, so I'm doing the cough drop thing. So that's what's in my mouth. I'm not eating on camera gratuitously. Okay, so there's so much to unpack, and I hope all of you who are watching this realize she is so relatable. Telling that story, I'm like, yep, I think you just said a lot of things that I have thought. And because it's exhausting trying to be perfect as an educator, because we're often so vilified. And so I just love your honesty, and that you are so real about all of this. Um, okay, so by the way, I taught fifth grade also, and yes, they smell after recess, so it's kind of hard for me to. It was hard for me to concentrate when they would come back in, because they would. Whew, that's a whole other author talk, probably. Okay, so I want to dig in a little bit more. It sounds like this book could be helpful for grown-ups too. I think
Sure.
I know a few who don't like to take ownership. Um, have you had any adults give you feedback like, "Oh my gosh, that helped me with my fill in the blank"?
Yeah. Well, when adults read it with the young people in their life, they realize, I think, some of the missing pieces that we've had when we were taught to say sorry. Like, and I write about this, I've written about this in a blog. EduMatch Publishing published this book, and I've written a couple of blogs since for them about it. A lot of times when we teach kids to apologize, it's just tell them you're sorry. We force kids to tell them to, before they're ever sorry, if they ever even feel sorry. That is one thing that I don't do as a parent or a teacher. I do not force apologies because those are, it's just you want, it imbalances the entire situation in a way that is even harder to come back from.
Mm-hmm.
So oh my gosh, what was the original question? Oh, adults.
Adults.
So adults have told me, yes, that they're like, okay, this is a better way to explain apologies. A couple of women, I think, including one of my former elementary teachers that taught fourth grade, Miss Gower. If you're, oh gosh, I should have said her name, but oh, she's in Missouri. Probably she won't see this, but she said, I want to order two copies, one for me in my classroom and one for my husband. So, so
I
I,
get
yeah,
it.
I said,
Melody, you mentioned being brought up. I want to dig in here. You said what you had been taught about apologizing, um, and about when you hurt people.
right,
And I'm going to kind of take that and blow it up just a little bit because I think that is so powerful
yeah,
that whether it's part of your the parenting style that your parents had, or it's part of your religious upbringing, or it's part of your culture, we have that hello Brene Brown guilt shame battle
yeah,
going on. And I think it sounds like maybe you're kind of addressing some of that, or at least making it so that people, kids in particular,
yeah,
can maybe learn a healthier version of how those two work.
yeah. I love that you said that. And I want to say, although my book is non religious at all, but it
Mhm.
definitely has elements of that. And when I was growing up, and it was because of all that you just said, the religion, the parenting style, the culture that I was involved in growing up in, you know, you had to forgive and you had to apologize. Like whether you
Mhm.
felt sorry, whether you wanted to forgive, like it was forced on you. And so as an adult, I realized that even though I told a lot of people that I forgave them, their apologies, or some of them never even gave apologies. I mean, I was taught that, that was just across the board. You had to do all of that. But here's the thing: when you force kids to do that, when you force people to do that, they don't go through the actual work of,
Mhm.
if you're the perpetrator of owning what you did to hurt somebody, and on the other side, if you are forced to forgive somebody because that's what you're supposed to do, you that's a lot of work. Like you can say the words I'm sorry, you can say the words I forgive you without
Mhm.
any work, and it means nothing. And so obviously the deeper that you are hurt, or the deeper that you have hurt somebody, the more work that needs to go into that to truly be apologetic about it and to truly forgive. I mean, those two issues right there, making apologies and actively forgiving something, they are so deep. And the way that I was raised, it was so like, this is what you do and then you move on. But then you're a grown up like me and you realize, I don't think that I forgave that person, and that person was never even sorry. And so then you're worrying about that in your mind because the way that you were brought up is not really the reality that you are living in. And it's not the reality for everybody because not everybody buys into that. So
Mm.
it's a head game, right? So I think that there needs to be really healthy conversations regarding this. And one thing that I have really tried to be when I talk with young people about this is to be open minded. When I ask them, do you have to forgive somebody that has hurt you? I try never to put my own belief system into that because I think that that is something that we should think about as young people and develop over time what makes sense for us. Because this,
Yeah.
there are students in our classrooms that are dealing with pain that we've never felt before. So to gloss over all of this and to put it in these neat little boxes is adding trauma to their lives and possibly making them feel like they're not enough, or that they're misunderstood even more than they already are. So it's a really delicate way to have a conversation, and I really try to be open-minded about this, and knowing that not everybody has those same belief systems that I do.
Another profound statement by you. And I want to go
Thanks.
back to another one that you said, that it's work.
Yeah.
And I think one of the injustices that sometimes we provide for our students is we don't have them struggle enough. And we talk about academic struggle, intellectual struggle, but we don't really talk about social emotional struggle or grit or resilience or however you want to categorize that. And I've been thinking about it a lot because I'm learning, I'm new at this company, just over a year, and I'm learning a lot. And one of the assessments we have is called the DESA. And so it's affective. And so I'm learning more about that. And as we're talking about some of that, whether it's academic or it's affective, we can make students feel like they aren't enough and that if I have to put in work, I am a failure.
Mm,
That imposter syndrome that GT kids,
yeah.
because that's my background, deal
Right.
with so much. If the first time I have to work hard on something, well, then I'm not really that smart after all. I'm not
Right.
really that great of a football player because I'm going to go to a sport because we all like sports. The first time, I was a great quarterback, and then I go to college, and I'm not big man on campus anymore. I must suck.
Yeah.
So, and I think we create adults that have a lot of issues that they don't need to have. And I think families, however the families look, the home life, in partnership with the schools, have a really great opportunity now with things like the I'm sorry story to have these conversations. And then we could have a whole generation of healthier students because they need to have the skills.
Yeah.
Um, and I think you would agree with this statement that we expect them to behave in a certain way, but we don't tell them how, we don't give them the tools.
Yeah.
We give them
100%.
multiplication tables so they can do math, but we don't give them the tools of how to be a good human being all the time. When you're annoying, how do you quit being annoying? And it sounds like the I'm sorry story is a tool. It is doing just that. So, what a worthy project, and like major hat tip to you, Melody, for
Thank you.
doing that. I want to shift gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, you said, I never thought I'd have this published. I bet
Hmm.
there will be people listening to this that are like, well, I have this story, but I mean, it's just me. Okay, maybe I'm projecting. This is how I would feel. Like, I'm just Monica. I'll never publish a book. Who would publish my book? What advice do you have for them, both personally, of, yeah, you can do this, and maybe even professionally, of how do you do this?
Yeah, and number 1, I would totally buy your book, Monica, so I hope that you are not struggling with that. I wanna give kudo I was I was gonna start coughing. I wanna give kudos to Dr. Sarah Thomas. She is the founder and CEO of EduMatch Publishing, and it is for educators by educators, and she always talks about how, just like you said, like, everybody's story should be told. I didn't write this book thinking it was going to be on the New York bestsellers, and I love that you said it's a tool because that's exactly what I want it to be. I want it to be a tool of conversation. And I think you can never have too much conversation with young people, talking with them and getting inside, letting them share. Like that's one of the best ways to reach them and to be able to kind of offer wisdom that they'll actually listen to. So if you have a story, and this is exactly what Dr. Sarah Thomas says, she's like, just start writing it. Don't worry about what your haters will think. Don't even worry about your haters. Right before this was published, I was like, oh my gosh, what if people hate this and send me bad reviews? And she's like, people would have to really really hate you and hate this story to take the time to make a bad review. Honestly, most people won't. And some of us, I have some bad reviews. It's not like everybody loves this, so don't worry about all of that. Get your story out. Just if you're like anything like me, it sits in my head and then I have to get it all out. Some people write a little bit every day, whatever your style is, and do it for yourself. And then
Mm,
when you start trusting people to read what you've written, you know, let them like share, they're going to give you some feedback. Some of it's going to be critical. Just be open to that. I had a lot of critical feedback, and some of it was really hard to, like, how could I put this and make this different? There's a lot of that, for sure. If you have never ever, if nobody's ever read anything that you've ever written before, that is a very scary feeling. I would
Yeah.
suggest starting a little blog, because if you start a blog and you kind of offer it to the people in your community, you're going to get used to that feeling of people seeing what you've written. You're going to develop your style of writing. You're going to be used to sharing some of your emotions that you may have kept buried for a little bit. And I think that really helps. I started blogging well before I started contributing to any books, and that really helped me. And just know that anybody could write a book. If you Amazon, for instance, you could, what is the program? You just becoming an author on Amazon is very easy. You don't even have to sell it if you didn't want to worry about the financial part of it, but you could,
Oh,
like, sell it through Amazon $5, for just an online copy of whatever you're writing. Um, Self-publishing is probably what most people can do. Here's the thing: if a big publisher takes you on, you're going to make a fraction of a royalty. With EduMatch, I make like 50% of the royalty after Amazon takes its, biggest chunk. If you self-publish, you get to keep all of the royalties, whatever that may be. I think I make like $2.50 every time a book is sold. So my royalties are not large by any means, and that doesn't bother me in the slightest. Just knowing that people read what I write is like a thrill for me. However, if your book is super, super successful, and there's a lot of, like, all over the place about it, people are talking about it, you've made it into the paper, you've made it on news, you never know. A big publisher could take you on. And then you would have to decide how much would you be, like, Dave, the pirate, Dave Burgess. He has written
yeah.
How to Teach Like a Pirate. He's actually my friend, and the fact that I couldn't remember his name is not because it's because of my brain and how it works. But when he first wrote How to Teach Like a Pirate, he self-published, and then he, like, sold it everywhere. He tells this story, and it got so popular that a publishing company did want to take it, but then he realized that they were keeping most of the royalties, and he was doing such a good job of selling the book himself. He eventually has his own publishing company, and he so it was a learning process, and it's something that you have to think about too. Like, what is your purpose? If
Hmm.
you're trying to make a lot of money, that's probably not going to happen to most of us. Is that okay? Is putting your voice out there worth it for you? You will get some negativity coming back to you, but also your voice will probably make somebody else on this earth feel seen. And that is a very powerful thing to happen. If you can do that, I promise you it's one of the best things in life to ever experience.
That, I mean, I don't even know how to respond to that. That was so powerful. And I think that's true. Do it for yourself. Don't worry about the haters. What's that new? Let them theory.
Yes. Hmm.
Let them. They're the
Hmm.
ones missing out. Okay, really quickly, you have contributed to other books. What have you contributed to?
The latest one was with EduMatch. It's Edu Snaps. Just came out in January, and you can find it on Amazon. It's like $5, or you can get the digital copy free from edumatchpublishing.com.
Hmm.
And that, I was actually the closing chapter of that book. And my chapter, I'm very proud about that, is about the experience that we give our students in their classroom, and how, especially if you're like, I taught middle school last year, and how you have different blocks, right? And things get old for you, or they get repetitive. But for our students, it's the first time they're experiencing some of the magic that we're unleashing for them, right? And to remember to try to always have that in your forefront, that the student experience is is more powerful than sometimes we remember, because we're just going through the motions a lot of times. And then, of course, admin and the state is throwing new stuff onto our plate. So a lot of times we get into that routine, and we're just going through, not because we're bad teachers at all, just because that's life. But if we could harness the fact that our students contribute so much more to their learning experience if we take that, what they're telling us. That was what I did last year. Like, oh, you don't like this assignment? Tell me what you would rather do in its place, and how are you going to meet this criteria that I need to grade? I need to know that you understand these standards. So what are you going to do? And it didn't bother me, because if I want students to spend time on a project that we're doing, then I want their hearts to be into it. And if they have something that's better, that doesn't offend me, because they're ultimately the ones who are learning for themselves, right? It's not about me. It's not really even about their grades. It's about what they're learning through the process. And so last year, I truly focused on that. I always had music playing in my classroom. And even though I hated a lot of their songs, if it was clean, we would listen to some of that, right? What could I do to engage them, make sure that they were part of their learning experience? And how could I tap that into what I was teaching to make sure that I wasn't competing with their cell phones 24/7, which I was sometimes. But most of my kids came into my class ready for whatever we were doing, not because language arts or social studies or multimedia, what I was teaching, was their favorite class, but they also knew that I cared about them and that what they
Mm,
said to me mattered. And I cared about the process of how they learned. And one of the most just the best compliment I got from one of my administrators and the counselor at the school I taught last year was that students that came from my class learned how to advocate for themselves, and they saw that as their 8th
oh,
grade year. Yeah. And that to
it's-
me is means more than anything. It means more than grades. It means more than what they if they
mm.
can, use grammar correctly, right? That was it.
Yeah, because you're not always going to be there. We
Right.
need to create some awesome humans that can go out and tend to themselves.
Yes. Yes.
And what you said about student engagement, so powerful. It's a lot of what I talk about when I'm out presenting and such. Is we've forgotten a lot of things, and it's not our fault. It's because of competing priorities, state legislation, federal legislation, whatever you want, all of it,
Mhm.
pile it on top of each other. But students today are really no different than we are, but they have more options than we
Right.
did. We didn't have cell phones that could give me the information quickly. So we didn't have a choice but to go to chemistry class and figure some of this out and try not to blow the school up.
Right.
Melody, this has been so much fun. Would you do me a favor? I know you've got a QR code, and I asked if you
Yes.
would show it. And guys, I'm going to post this video. You're watching it, then you saw it posted. And I'm going to post this as well. It takes you to her page where you can find out all kinds of information, including the I'm sorry story. I think if you have a human, a tiny human in your life, a small human, a non adult human, or maybe an adult human, this might be an absolutely wonderful Easter gift or
Mm,
birthday or Christmas. I know it's going to be one of my go tos. Okay, thank you so much
thank
for
you.
showing that. Melody, thank you for joining me today. You in Alaska, so you're in a very different time zone. So we were able to find a time that worked in all the time zones because I'm currently in the Eastern time zone. So
Yes.
we couldn't be further apart. I mean, I guess we could, but not be in the continental United States.
Right. But
I
thank
guess,
you for having me. Yeah, and thank you for showing my work, and for any teacher, educator, whatever position that you're in. Thank you for doing the hard work. It is so
mm,
hard. It is a lot of times thankless. And like you said earlier, there are times when we are vilified by people that have absolutely no idea what we're really doing. And so it takes a lot of courage to do what we're doing, especially in the world that we're living in right now. And to any educator that is watching, seriously, you're doing the work that is so necessary and so needed in our world right now. I just thank you from the bottom of my heart. And thank you, Monica, watching you just blossom. And you've always been a friend that has allowed me to have an open mind and think differently. And I think when I think about our friendship, I think, we used to always have a brunch, right? Our monthly brunch where a group of
mhm.
us got together. And I just remembered that you thought so differently. Maybe not so differently, but there was just something about you that invited me to question also what I was learning and what I was thinking, and to embrace that. And there should be more of us like that in the world. So thank you also for helping me to become who I am.
And same friend. We stay connected through Facebook, and you post things and I go, oh, I think two things when you post something. It's not just me,
Right.
and it's whatever the topic is. I think it's not just me, and I also think, oh, I need to think on that a little bit more.
Thank
Um,
you.
and I think the I'm sorry story is or yes, I'm sorry story is
Yeah.
right in line with all of that. Look how cute.
That is dyslexia font, by the way, because for all my students that were dyslexic, that's why it looks a little funny. And my editor, Dr. Sarah Thomas, she was like, yes, let's go for it. So yes.
I've never known, and I don't think it looks
Mhm.
funny. I
Okay.
think it looks great. I think it's just fun. Thank you for sharing that. I hope those who are watching this think, well, okay, I could use that font too. Okay,
Yes.
I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see who we have on deck for next time.